Right, so lads, today's class we're going to introduce the topic of agency theory and how agency theory can influence the business as a whole. So just so I can get a gist of where we're at, hands up if you have an idea or kind of know what agency theory is. Right, keep your hands up if you've witnessed it or experienced it before. So none of you have ever witnessed it, no? Well, to be honest lads, everyone has experienced it in most of their life. Like, so if you have a part-time job, for instance, agency theory is formed basically between you as the worker and your manager. So like, I'm assuming most of you have part-time jobs because you're college students, yeah? Yeah. So, Brian, where do you work? Board and you have a manager, I take it, yeah?
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Right, so you and your manager, you're like taking orders, whatever. But what's your main priority at the end of the day when you're working? Like, what do you feel like you're there for?
To cultivate peace.
Do you have a cultivate peace? Yeah, that's a good answer, but like, you're there basically. Are you there for the money, or are you there to better Board Lamona?
Oh no, I'm there for the money.
Yeah, and your manager, I take it like. Is he old? Is he?
He's old, yeah, he's retired next
He
year.
probably has a family, does he?
He does.
Yeah, he does. So his overall aim is basically so he can better the firm. So your overall aim is so that you get money at the end of the week, so you can go to college, spend it on beer, whatever you want, buy your shopping out of it. So basically, agency theory applies to you here because there's a conflict in interest here between you and your manager. So your interest is that you want money and you want to do your job. His interest is that he betters the firm, makes it more profitable, more efficient. So basically, the downfall with agency theory is when there is a conflict of interest. Right, so basically here we have a definition from Shankman here who talks about the relationship between an actor and a group who has certain obligations to fulfill for another group. Basically, as we said with Brian there earlier, there's the employee and the manager. So if we take, for instance, another example, so let's say a restaurant, you have the employee, the waiter, and they have their subordinates that work with them. And usually, most of the time, they tend to be like students who are just there for the weekend jobs, just to earn money. And then you have the manager who's also just there to run the whole operations of the restaurant. So basically, the waiters, they feel like they're just there for the wage. They're not there to benefit the company overall, to make it more profitable. But the manager, on the other hand, his overall goal, because he's employed by the owners of the company, is to make the restaurant as efficient as possible. So when we look at this example, we see the conflict in interests between the two. So you have the waiters who just want the money, they just want their money, that's all they're there for, they don't want to better the company. And then you have the manager who simply wants to better the company. So let's say, for instance, Brian again, let's say you're a waiter in the company and you really don't care. You just don't care, you're slacking off, you're doing just the bare minimum. Then you have the manager on the other hand who's nitpicking at you, constantly going at you, and he's just really fed up. So basically, what we incur here is, we will incur is an agency cost. So the cost of you and the manager. So basically, you're going to get fed up, you're going to leave the job because you don't want to work there anymore. So the cost of rehiring can be viewed as an agency cost. Right, so we'll just click on to the next slide there. Yeah, so this here just explains it in a more visual example of how it all works. So it has a more broader example using the shareholders and then the directors and the task. So the principal or the shareholders here would basically be Brian's manager. The agent would be Brian, and the task is to serve the customers at a set standard, to be on time for work, to do your job basically. Right. So here we have basically a theoretical framework of how the principal and agent relationship work. So we're going to use just a basic example of the agent who is the manager and the principal who is the shareholder. So with this relationship, there's three conflicts that can happen. So the first one is shirking, the second one being self-interest, and the third one being information asymmetry. I'm going to explain them in the next slide under agency costs, okay? So what we want to focus here is just the end goal. So basically what can happen to the firm with these problems existing. So what could happen here between a manager and a shareholder is that a manager might want to diversify the firm, and as a result, the shareholder stock price might reduce, if this happens. So, therefore, due to information asymmetry, the self-interest, and possibly the shirking, it can result in a lack of trust between the shareholders and the managers. So the agency costs. What are agency costs? The conflicts of interest, maximising their value. So if we take a more broader example, let's say, for instance, shareholders and the managers of the company. When shareholders get involved with a company, you could take, for instance, a large corporation, let's say Google or someone along that line, a big multinational. If someone gets involved and they're of high power, they may set different goals. So they're there to make a profit at the end of the day. The manager's there, obviously they want to see the firm doing better, but at the end of the day, they're just there to make it better. They don't see the end goal. So shareholders may impose a new rule basically saying that they want to cut down costs, they want to better the firm, make it more efficient. But the manager believes that they've only got so many workers, they're not going to get the job done. So, he gets mad, shareholders, manager have an argument, manager decides to leave. So here then we incur a cost whereby the manager leaves, and a manager usually in multinational corporations tends to be of a high wage. So you can imagine to rehire a manager of that category would cost significant amounts. So the agency cost bared by the firm here would be the manager deciding to leave the firm, which is undertaken by the principal. Basically the cost here is the cost of me having to look after someone's work on a day-to-day basis. So as we previously stated with Brian here, if we say that Brian is shirking, what we basically mean here is that he's taking it easy, he's not doing the job that we require him to do. So because he's shirking, we have a monitoring cost here that is basically us having to continually watch him and see what he's doing. Right, so next we have bonding costs, which is undertaken by the agent. Basically what we mean here is the opportunity cost that a manager might experience when they feel morally obliged to stay with the firm. So let's say Colin here, for instance, you feel morally obliged to stay with the firm, you feel attached to the firm because you've been there for ages. So your opportunity cost here is that you're staying with the firm, but you also have potential to receive a better job with a better wage somewhere else. But because you're morally obliged to stay with the firm, that's your opportunity cost. So that is what the bonding cost is. Right. So the residual cost is basically the cost that is left over due to the lack of trust between the principal and the agent. So basically the shareholder and the manager. And basically what we're trying to say here is that both parties act self-interest. So the manager wants to diversify the firm. So his main interest is that he increases his wage. But the shareholder, however, his main interest is that he increases his stock, so he gets more of an income coming in. However, the information asymmetry caused here is basically that the manager wants to diversify the firm to increase his wage. However, the shareholder doesn't fully understand why, and as a result, he's not sure of how that will impact his stock price or his income. So basically, the residual cost here is what is left over after this takes place. Right, so from the literature of agency theory, derive these following implications. And take note of these implications because these can be examined in the summer. So, the first one is by Marco. He says that agency theory can be used to identify the obligations of senior management. What we really mean here is what we previously said with the manager who wishes to diversify the firm so he can increase his wage. So basically, what we're trying to say here is that the manager is acting in his own self-interest. He doesn't align his goals completely to what the organisation wants. So he's aligning them with what he wants rather than what the organisation wants. Right, so the second implication is by Buchanan. He says that the analysis of agency risks through the use of agency theory provides an understanding of real-world moral codes that structure activities in an organisation. The third one we use is by Heath. He says that agency theory allows for a set of principles to be constructed to see how the business world would present in the absence of business ethics. And the fourth one we use here is also by Heath, who says that agency theory provides a role in combating the idea that business is beyond the guidelines of moral evaluation and constraint. Right, so on this next part, I'm going to pass you to my colleague who's going to talk to you about agency theory and corporate governance.
Right, so I'm going to talk about agency theory and corporate governance. Corporate governance is the sum of management and supervisory rules and regulations for international enterprises, and the reason it's linked with agency theory is because agency theory is one of the theoretical and model concepts of corporate governance. So basically, corporate governance assigns responsibility and accountability towards actual enterprise itself. So basically, every company, whether it's if you're working for a board and owner like Brian was, they all have sets of rules and regulations. You can see here that agency theorists suggest that the separation between manager and shareholder creates the conflict, triggering agency issues that can decrease firms' performance, as stated by Jensen and Meckling in 1976. Basically, that means that there will be a decrease of performance due to maybe how far the shareholder and the manager and the actual employee, their relationship is, how the distance between that. That again can revert back to your agency costs, where the residual costs mean that the change of value of the company, so that's your principal agent relationship. And you can kind of link that together with the corporate governance, because your agency theory will define how well your company does. Right, so through the agency theory there's many consequences for business in regards to the actual change in value of the company. If you want to actually go down through all the different principles and agents of the company, so for example the directors, the managers, the employees, we can start off by using Brian's example of how he works in board and owner. So basically the director or the owner of the company would have set up that for a purpose. So say his family could have inherited lots of boglands down the country and wants to use the cultivation of peat in regards to making profits for himself or whoever set up the company. You can lead this on to the fact that maybe the managers don't share this opinion. So the managers are there basically, they're obviously looking to make a salary. So you could say that in regards to the manager's power, they're looking over lots of employees, and you could say that they might agree, they're obviously not directly influenced by the profits of the company, unless they obviously have a different agreement in regards to that. But for example, say if the manager, he's looking to make himself more powerful, he's looking to get richer, he's looking to make more profits. So what he could do is through diversification, he could take some of the funds from his, say there was a project going on with different kind of cultivations they were doing. He could take the profits from that and put it into something else. For example, if he wants to go into another little market within the company of another type of energy source, which could be say a small wind farm that they have down the road, and he wants to kind of put some of the finances that was for one part of the business into that could diversify his actual power of the company, because he's looking over two kind of projects now. In regards to that, he's making more profit because he has more power, he has more responsibility. Job security for the manager could be negatively impacted from that, because he's not basically doing what the managers or not what the directors are doing, or what they're asking them to do. In regards to the job security for the managers there, it could be negatively impacted. So for example, since they're looking to spread the finances to different areas and different markets, it's obviously not what the directors or the owners are asking them to do, so that's obviously going to reflect that in his job security. If he gets caught doing that and it's not something that they're actually directing the funds for, he could lose his job. So that's how it's going to negatively impact that. Pay and rewards for the manager, like I said, it will influence the pay and rewards, because he'll be getting more pay, he's going to have more responsibility, he's going to be looking after more projects, and a lot more people in the business will have to look up to him and have to answer to him. So there's your kind of pay and rewards. In regards to the employees, for example, Brian there, who goes down the weekends and he works there as a part-time job, all he's kind of caring about is like, grand, go in, do me 16 hours, get the money, go back to college during the weekend, spend it on beer or whatever he spends it on for the shopping or whatever. So he's kind of focused on his pay, his take-home pay. Job security for lads who are kind of working part-time, as kind of everyone knows, you're going into your job, you're doing what you're getting asked to do, and that's really it. You're not going to go in unless you're looking to kind of make the way up the ladder in that job and become a manager, become a director of the company. You kind of want to go in, do your job and leave. You're not going to go in and say, oh, let's go in and let's start up these new projects, or let's go to these other bogs where we can actually get more P out and make a bit more profit. It's kind of in Brian's regard, he wants to go in, 16 hours, pay, that's it. So they're the kind of the links or the consequences of the agency theory, and you can see that all three of them. So you have the owners and directors. It differs majorly in regards to everyone's kind of ideas of what they want, and that's where you can see kind of the change of value of the actual customer, or of the change value of the business itself over the actual use of the agency theory. Right, so as we just looked over, I'm just going to have a little recap of what the actual agency problem is, or the problem with the agency theory. As Coranan O'Hara and Penrose in 2005 stated, agency theory is accountable for the ethical misconduct due to the shareholder pressure to seek maximum profits. So in regards to that, it's kind of shown that if say the directors of the company are literally seeking major profits and not caring what anyone else in the business thinks, it's going to separate. The agency theory is going to filter down through the principal-agent relationship, and it's not going to look. It's going to make the stock price drop. You're going to have people seeking different ways. They can kind of like make their own kind of rewards in the business, get their pay better, seek their own power. Divergence of ownership. You can kind of see that we can through the kind of diversification in a manager's point of view, where he wants to kind of get maximum power through the hierarchy. You kind of see that's going to be a problem. Next, when manager goes to maximise profit, their own interests, that's obviously another big one, because their own interests mightn't be in line with the interests of the directors, which in turn is going to reflect down to your employees. So if say the employees had any kind of influence from the directors, or they knew what the company was about, they could kind of base their own work on that. And then if their managers are coming in telling them something totally different, it's gonna mess up the whole situation of who are they actually working for? Are they working for their managers, or are they working for a company to benefit? Are they going to benefit themselves? Or it's kind of like, if they're benefiting themselves through kind of the views of the company, is that better than actually working for their particular manager and making him happy? But as explained there by the symmetry of information, so basically the filtering down of information from the directors and owners to the managers to the employees, kind of this gives us the reasons why the separation of ownership and control creates agency problems in regards to corporate governance. So that's your rules and regulations of the whole company, and how each different part of the principal-agent relationship doesn't actually follow it directly. So that's your managers having different views and different rules to actually the directors, so their views of why the company was set up. As stated there by Ramdani and Wittgenstein in 2012, as a result, the value of the firm is below the optimum that could be achieved if the owner would act as the manager. So basically, in regards to that point there, what they were stating is that if the owner was able to work at all different levels of the business, it would turn out a lot different than, say, for example, having your owner who comes into the AGM, like obviously every year, or if he has a different meeting point, different through the year. So you have your owner, your director, and your employees and different people. The result is obviously going to be different than if the owner who created the company for these particular views, if he was at every stage of the organisation. So I think that's a major point that kind of sums up the whole point of the agency theory, that the views kind of do separate as you kind of filter down through the different areas. And so overall, this would sum up that there's a decrease in the firm's performance in regards to the change in value of the stock price and the overall profitability of the company. And that's basically it. But so I'm going to go through a basic recap of what we've done, of some of the kind of basic elements of the agency theory. And we're going to do it in an MCQ form, just kind of so it gives you a few options that you can pick from. So the first question is going to be, why is there a conflict of interest between the principal and agent in an agency relation? First answer, because the agent cannot be expected to hold their part of the deal. B, because the principal cannot be expected to hold their part of the deal, because both parties have different interests and incentives. Or D, there's no general conflict of interest, it depends on the persons involved. So we don't have any input on that.
I think it's A, because the agent cannot be expected to hold their part in the deal.
That could be a possibility. You can kind of say that because the way we're kind of saying it, they all have, the actual answer here is C, because both parties have different interests and incentives. The principal in one case could be the owner, so you're looking at their views. So that's what you're saying. You said the agent does it, or the principal?
The agent.
So the agent. So for example, the agent is, say, your employee in the company. The employee is going to have their part of the deal, which is their contract, their kind of idea to work. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that the two relationships are going to be different. So they're going to, like, there's no guarantee that they're going to hold part of the deal. For example, you have your managers that could have different kind of incentives. They want to go off and do something else, and that's why the answer is C, because both parties have different interests and incentives. So your managers are going to want more money, going to want more power. Your employees could just want their basic pay, their kind of basic tasks they have during the day. Yes, I know. I see what you're saying with the whole the one party cannot be expected to hold their part of the deal. But again, you have to take into consideration the other agents in the different parts of the business as well. So the next question is, what are agency costs? Dahi just covered them a few minutes ago. So basically, first one, the costs agents incur to do their jobs. The salaries principals have to pay agents. The cost of writing and enforcing the contract, or the cost of monitoring agents' activities to make sure they do their jobs.
So I'll go with B.
Not exactly. So basically, the agency costs are the costs that agents incur to do their jobs. You see, all of these are kind of different costs in their own right, but the costs agents incur to do their jobs are like the total cost. So you have residual costs, you have monitoring costs, you have bonding costs. And you can see here another option would have been D would have been the cost of monitoring agents' activities to make sure they do their jobs. But again, there's a lot more than just monitoring in the whole situation. And the final question we're going to go into is, in which of the following situations are you the principal in an agency relation? You deposit money in a hedge fund. B, as an architect you design a new building. C, as a manager you present a new investment plan to an annual shareholders meeting. Or D, you deposit money in a bank account. What do you reckon yourself?
I think it's B. As an architect, you design a new building. I was thinking C as well, but in that situation, I think the manager would be the agent and not the principal at the AGM. So then the architect himself would be the principal.
Exactly. So as you said, B, you're an architect. You're designing a new building. So what you're going to do is, you're an architect. You're drawing up the plan for the actual building. You're going to give it down to the building agency to actually build it, and they're going to follow on to kind of put it down to their employees, their builders, all their kind of tradesmen to do the work. So exactly, you're dead right. An architect is the principal in that agency relation. I'm just going to go over the answers here. So yeah, run back over it. Both parties have different interests and incentives. That is why there's a conflict of interest between principal and agents in an agency relation. Agency costs are the costs agents incur to do their jobs, which is obviously, like I said, monitoring, bonding, and residual costs. After that, then, just what we said there, the architects designing the building would be the principal in an agency relation. Right, so we went over the importance of agency theory as a kind of whole, and I gave the basics and different kind of situations in which we can put it into. But for the proper importance of it, we're going to have to relate it back to real world examples and different kind of things. So the one we're going to focus on today is, there's been different ones, there's the Boeing buyback, Goldman Sachs, and the fall of Enron. I think the one that is going to be the best way to understand it is kind of to explain the fall of Enron to you. I'm just going to bring in one of my colleagues who has a lot of information on that for you.
As Colin mentioned, the fall of Enron is a great example of how the agency theory is used in business and the devastating effects it can have on not only the business but the livelihood of people itself.
This is a story about the fall of Enron, one of the world's largest energy companies, and how knowledge of decision psychology and subjective risk can improve decision making. Contrary to popular belief, the story of Enron is a story about people, not money. One important decision led to Enron's fall. The following bankruptcy resulted in 20,000 people losing their jobs and pensions, billions of dollars vanishing in thin air, and even loss of life. Enron was a giant in the US energy industry, but in 1997 losses started building up. To avoid this hurting the stock price, one central person decided to apply structured finance in order to hide debt from the public.
Here we see how one vital decision consequently ended in loss of 20,000 jobs and pensions, and loss of billions of dollars, and even the loss of life. Agency theory, as we discussed earlier on, explains the relationship between principals and agents in business. It is concerned with resolving problems within the agency. In this case, it was not carried out correctly.
Structured finance worked by creating 100 special companies, so-called special purpose entities or SPEs, whose sole purpose was to do business with Enron. By hiding debt in these SPEs, Enron maintained the illusion of profitability. However, it was a risky practice because of the expected reaction if it became public knowledge.
Here, a central person within Enron decided to hide their debts by applying structured finance. They maintained the illusion of maintained profit. These kind of mistakes will lead to conflict between the agency and its shareholders. There's clearly a lack of trust shown in Enron due to its deceitfulness towards its shareholders. They should have known how risky it would be to hide their debts if it became public knowledge.
An attitude is an opinion, a perception, or an inclination an individual has, and it is based on feelings, thoughts, and behavior. Our intrinsic attitudes immediately tell us whether something is good or bad. Attitudes are affected directly through personal experience or indirectly by influence from others. Nevertheless, once an attitude is established, it is very hard to change. As CEO of Enron, Jeffrey Skilling was the key decision maker and holds the lead role in the Enron story. He had some distinct attitudes towards risk and his own abilities. Skilling's positive attitudes towards risk was exemplified by his passion for extreme sports. Skilling also had high thoughts of his own abilities. When asked by his Harvard professor if he was smart, he replied, "I'm fucking smart." Skilling's attitudes towards risk could have affected the subjective risk assessment.
To explain how Enron's choice came about, we look at three different psychological effects: attitude, prospect theory, and sunk cost fallacy. Attitudes are opinions or perceptions that people have. It is based on their feelings and thoughts and how they are affected by their own personal experiences or the influence of others.
When faced with mounting losses in 1997, Skilling made the risky decision to hide debt using structured finance instead of accepting the losses and re-evaluating how Enron did investments.
CEO Jeffrey Skilling was the key decision maker in Enron. He believed in his own abilities and his own attitude towards risk. When the big losses came about in 1999, he made a high-risk decision by accepting to use structured finance instead of accepting losses. They should have re-evaluated how Enron did investments. This links in very well with what was mentioned earlier by Colin when he discussed how managers' goals differ from shareholders. Making these risks shows Skilling wanted to maximise profits and was looking out for his own interests, while shareholders would be inclined to be interested in keeping the value.
Also, people tend to overestimate one's actual ability and generally believe themselves to be better than others. It might be the case that Skilling acknowledged the risk associated with the choice, but felt confident that he would be able to pull it off.
He may have overestimated his own abilities and may have thought he was better than others. He realised the risk involved and still decided to go along with it.
Eventually, alarm bells had to start ringing. In February 2001, a Fortune article questioned if the Enron stock was overpriced. This article triggered a number of reactions that put Enron under the loop. Upon realizing that Enron was under scrutiny, the parties involved initiated a damage control operation. But it was already too late. Executives had already started selling their shares, and in August 2001, Skilling tearfully resigned as CEO.
As discussed in previous slides about the consequences of agency theory, we see that Skilling used his power to make this vital decision that impacted badly on the business and its shareholders. They should have faced the problem head on and dealt with the debts instead of hiding them. In regards to agency theory, you must be aware of your own abilities, account for risk, especially in a realistic way, and not become a victim of sunk cost fallacy. You must show leadership by cutting out losses.
So what can we take from this tragic story? For one, be aware of your own attitudes. If you have a tendency towards risk-seeking, ask someone to revise your decisions. 2. Account for subjective risk and the certainty effect. Utilize expected utility to maintain objectivity when making major decisions. 3rd, do not become a victim of the sunk cost fallacy and self-justification. Instead, show leadership by cutting your losses.
Enron could have been avoided if you showed leadership and dealt with the losses itself in an honest way, and therefore creating a better relationship between management and shareholders.